Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Low Carb Lifestyle Podcast. Wherever you are watching this, thank you for joining us to watch this. So this is another live presentation, but it has been pre-recorded. So Natalie and I are not actually doing this in front of you now, but we are available and will be available. If you have questions after the conversation or during the conversation, please put it in the comments and we will get back to you and answer them as best that we can. So welcome, Natalie West, to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with us today. I look forward to sharing your amazing knowledge and wisdom.
Thanks, Trace. Always a pleasure. Love sharing what we're passionate about.
Oh, no, absolutely. So you are a psychotherapist, but you also are very passionate about the carnivore lifestyle, obviously from a personal experience and everything that you know around that. Would you like to just share with everyone, what you do and how carnivore has sort of come into the space for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a bit of history. I've been a psychotherapist for over 20 years now. And one of the biggest things that I can kind of equate to where I am now is way back when I started my training, I had a mentor say to me, you know, Natalie, if you ever want to do this properly and serve people fully, you just can't treat individual pieces of the puzzle. And I was just like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, if you want to talk about psychotherapy and people's brains and, you know, the psychology of self-image and identity, you know, that's one part of the puzzle. But unless you actually put the other part of the puzzle together, which is actually the gut, which literally is our first brain, he said to me, you will never, ever put that puzzle together fully, and you will never serve people the way that they need to be served. So for me back then, I was like, whoa, you know, because we always hear that, you know, we'll just talk to the brain and we'll, you know, do psychotherapy or any kind of psychology training and stuff like that. But, you know, I was so grateful for him because that really started me on the journey in the deeper discovery of, well, hold on, mental health keeps going up, anxiety keeps going up, all of the components of what mental health is for people. I did my psychotherapy training, then also went down the route of psychiatric nutrition. Back then it was called, because I'm pretty old. You know, it all made sense. And then I realized, like, well, we can't talk to a starving brain. How do we allow people to be empowered and understand themselves? And, you know, for me, I'd always been kind of healthy in inverted commas and understood, you know, I guess eating was given to me by my mom, and, you know, it was meat and 3 veg back then, and, you know, in the 70s and the 80s, and you just kind of learnt and you thought that that was healthy, and fruit and all of those kind of things. But it wasn't until, you know, fast forward with my own experience and, you know, dealing with, you know, my own kind of self-image issues when it comes to food and being an ex-bodybuilder and, you know, going down that rabbit hole with restricted calories and high carb and low fat, which I'll come back to later, and the amount of times you have to eat all the time, which for me, it's like, kind of sounded right at the time, but it wasn't until nearly 2 years ago now, I started to get some really kind of funky symptoms. And one of my symptoms was half my face went numb one day, and I woke up, and it was during lockdown that happened in Melbourne the first time. And I thought, oh, maybe it's just stress, because I was eating every 3 hours, a very high carb based diet because of my bodybuilding background, but also too, a lot of the psychiatric training and nutrition back then kind of melded on, you know, keeping your metabolism up and eating carbs and all of that kind of stuff. So I was kind of like, I was a bit in a dichotomy of what was going on. And then I went, So I went and had a blood test, and then he came back to me and he said, you're actually borderline type 2 diabetic. And I'm like, what? I'm like 59 kilos, just for people to kind of get that. Yeah. Wow. But Trace, I was always hungry. So I'd kind of, you know, deep dived into, you know, understanding what insulin resistance was. And that's kind of basically where I was at. So personally, for me, I know that food is a fuel for your gut and your brain and for mental health, but also, you know, understanding that the things that we also learn, we can sometimes have to unlearn. So I went down a big rabbit hole and found carnivore diet, and I was just like, you know what? I'm the kind of person that jumps straight in. So my mental health, just to let everyone know, you know, I've had bouts of anxiety and depression and you know, lots of self-image conflict issues in my past, but mental health is a really, really high value for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to help people the way that I do. So I have to help myself first for me to be able to be in a space to help other people. So mental health for me comes first. So when I kind of went down the meat-based way of eating, it all made sense. Literally, once I started investigating, I'm like, oh my gosh, this all makes sense. I dove straight in. I didn't even think about it. I was just like, this is it. This is what I need. And within a month, I was like, whoa. Just life-changing, everything balanced out. I also reversed my insulin resistance. I actually had asthma also from a very young age. That went, all my allergies went. So for me, finding that way of eating really was just such a life-changing moment. But then also too, feeling the change of groundedness when you eat meat and what comes from meat, just from a cortisol, mental health, stress, was 360. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. What were some of the things that you did read that really made that an easy decision for you?
Well, I'd been on a low-fat diet, and high carb, and I was eating peanut butter, but even that, I was just like, hold on. I would eat, and then I'd be hungry 45 minutes later, and I was like, Because obviously, when you eat, your insulin goes up, and then it's got to come down, and then it goes up. So that's kind of where most people are at, which is really unhealthy. So when I followed Dr. Mason out of Sydney, it was just more of the fact that the amount of, I guess, gut health that I needed to reboot for myself in relation to the neurotransmitters which are given through meat and the amount of nutrients that is in meat versus a plant-based diet. So for me, it was just more about going, hold on, I've reduced my, intake of fat, high carb. It just kind of clicked with me, and I went, I've got to reverse this. This is actually doing the opposite. And I actually kind of went, I'll give it 30 days. I'm sure I'm not going to die. And that's 2 years ago. So it just made sense intuitively. And just within the first 2 weeks, Trace, I just felt totally and utterly different. And that's why I just kept going. Yeah. And also don't do plants either. So I'm also zero carb. So I haven't touched a carbohydrate for 2 years, no plants. And clearly not malnourished.
Clearly not. So I'd love you to share your knowledge and insight around, understanding this gut-brain connection, because I think that's just something that people find, they don't really understand. And it's so important. And as you said, the gut, I've heard Dr. Pran talk about this too, the gut is our first brain. But how does this work? What can you share around, what you know around all that?
Dealing with, mental health with a lot of clients and, each person, and also being self-image specialist. So that's kind of where I sit in the tools of what I do with people. So one part of it, Trace, is helping people understand how their mind works. So consciously and unconsciously, and understanding our programming about our self-image and our identity. Then on top of that, the next question I generally ask people, so the first one would be, have you ever been told how your mind works? Do you understand how your mind works? Most people say no. Second question is, do you understand the power of your gut and how that works with mental health? The question is generally no, because medical history and doctors generally don't use that connection. It's only normally functional practitioners that actually understand that connection. So normal doctors aren't trained in that. And I'll, be very proud to say a lot of the amazing doctors that we work with, are fully in understanding of nutritional training, whereas a lot of GPs have no idea. So I always say to people, do not get your nutritional advice from a GP unless they are specifically trained in that, because you're not going to get the right answers. So secondly, I'm such an educator. So what I want people to do is to empower themselves with the knowledge. So a lot of people will be like, well, this is really uncomfortable, Natalie. I've never heard this before. I've been living this way for 20 or 30 or 40 years, and I've been in therapy for 10 years. And what you're saying to me just literally just makes my brain hurt. And I'm like, well, that's great, because that's the first doorway into understanding yourself and empowering yourself. So going back to our gut. So our gut, literally 90% of what happens in our body comes from our gut. So the neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and all the enzymes are actually in our intestines. So when we hear the word serotonin, a lot of people who have had a mental health issue will say, I've been told I have a serotonin imbalance or a chemical imbalance in my brain. And I'm like, well, what test did you have? Did you go into hospital and did they measure that? Everyone says no. And historically, I think over 20 years now, that kind of has been debunked in relation to having a chemical imbalance. But let's just move down to that gut for a second, because most people in the world, like 1 in 4 right now, suffer from some mental health issue. I don't use the word mental illness because I don't believe in it. It's a mental health issue, but we've got to understand it's not just here. It's not just a self-image issue or a psychological issue. It's your gut that's not working properly. And if we look at what most people fuel their bodies with, so just to make it really simple, our body is a chemical factory. That's what we need. Your body needs to be fueled, the right chemicals for it to actually work. So, for example, your neurotransmitters, your little message and chemical pathways that are vital for mood and behavior. They are vital, okay? So someone can go to therapy for 10 years and talk about, their childhood and, how bad they feel about themselves, but then will walk out and go fuel themselves with sugar and high, based flowers and lots of plants that have natural nutrients. And I know Dr. Chaffee talks about that. So, but still not getting the connection. So they walk out, not feed themselves properly. And again, we've got to step back a little bit in relation to how we're programmed that way too. And one of the other really big things, Trace, is I have a lot of people that will say, oh, well, I do feel better when I kind of start to take out all these, breads and sugars and all, and even plant oils. Plant oils are one of the worst things you can put in your body as well from an inflammatory point. It'll inflame your gut and then your brain gets inflamed. So don't ever underestimate. It's around 90% your gut controls. So if we have an inflamed gut, which most people are walking around with, because of, like we said, cereals, sugars, and if you look at most aisles in the supermarket, there's only one aisle you should be at, and that's the meat aisle and the butter aisle, the dairy aisle, unless you're dairy intolerant, but we can go back to that later. But it's that gut connection that you have to feed to be able to make your brain work and also to control your behavior. So if you have erratic moods, up and down, need to eat all the time, never feel satiated, and that's the other thing too. One of the big things with eating this way is you're just fully satiated. We are so conditioned to literally just be eating all the time. And, I'm a big faster as well, because, your body can either run on ketones or it can run on glucose, or it can just run on sugar. So one of them is more disastrous than the rest of them.
Yeah. It makes so much sense, but it's just mind-boggling how it's so not a part of standard care. We understand why that's the case. It's just medicine is pharmacology in a lot of ways. And I love how you said that, when people first hear this, they get very uncomfortable and, their brain wants to explode. And, that is a good thing. Exactly as you say, we don't have to fear that. I think we can really embrace that to think, okay, well, maybe this is me evolving and transforming. And this is how I am going to see something new and get somewhere new, because clearly what I've been doing up until this point isn't working. So the brain loves to say, well, just keep doing it harder and keep doing the same thing, but do it harder. But we have to stop and really say, well, actually, no, we just need to change paths,
We do, and The one thing that I love about the carnivore way of eating, it's such a beautiful foundation for people to really understand how they can feel. And that's one of the most things that I see, not alone with myself, but also with my clients. Like, first thing, within 2 to 3 weeks, this is what they've all said. Kind of feel really grounded, and this is what they do. They're like grounded, sleeping better, don't seem to be as angry. And I'm like, yeah. However, on the other side of that trace is also our conditioning when it comes to family and friends. And this is one of the big things where if someone wants to step into that empowerment and to really understand that brain, the gut-brain connection, and what food I'll use loosely, that they're actually fueling themselves with, a lot of people will have an opinion, they'll have a thought, and they'll have a reaction. So, I've had clients say to me, when I want to have my steak at 11 o'clock or I want to have it at 2 p.m., it's like, oh, you can't eat too much of that. That'll kill you. And they just get really despondent because obviously we are so consumed to be caring about what other people think. But at the end of the day, it's like you said, if you've been living with something for a long, long time and nothing is changing, and within a 2 to 3 week period, you can feel a change, what does that tell you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we can certainly see a lot around other people's reactions being about them. It's okay. It's going to happen. It makes people uncomfortable when we step out and do something different to what we're used to. But, we get better at managing that, I think. I think it's all part of the process too. And
well, I think it's when we start to feel. So, us human beings, we get so used to sitting in a certain level of feeling like, I put a post up recently about it. Like, most people I speak to drag themselves out of bed every day. They drag themselves around every day. They're constantly, eating sugar, constantly drinking Coke. And by the way, water as well is like literally 92% of the water that you need to get, from not tap water. Please don't drink fluoride and chlorine. One of the worst things you can do to your body. So it literally is about going, well, if I'm doing, it's like, that saying, it's like, if I keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, you've got to get uncomfortable. And if other people are uncomfortable, that's their business, not yours. But I always say to people, your mental health, you have one body. You have one body. That's it.
Yeah. We do. We do have one body, and I think it's so easy to forget that. And it's a pretty resilient, a pretty amazing body. It's full of wisdom. It's full of healing capacity, and I think that's what gets uncovered. I think the journey for Carnivore for me has been in parallel with a massive transformation mentally. Overcoming huge things that I wasn't even aware of. It is where the magic is. It is. Beautiful.
It's something also too that it's such a way of eating that just keeps you so level. And it's obviously because your insulin's not going up and down all day with sugar. But also too, once again, we're also being told and conditioned to the fact that, high cholesterol and high fat, saturated fat like butter and, meat fat have been dangerous. But, in all the podcasts and all the experts you've spoken to, that's totally and utterly demystified. And we know why, because of a certain agenda. But again, it's coming back to clients as well from saying, well, I've eaten plants most of my life. And I'm like, well, okay, great. How about we just step back from that? Let's start from a clean slate. Let's just get that gut fueled with, good quality grass-fed beef and whatever you can afford, get your fat levels up. And again, if you need to go and get your bloods done, go to a carnivore doctor or a low-carb doctor that knows what they're talking about. The other thing, if we look at a mental health issue, especially when it comes to cholesterol, everyone literally has been told that you've got to have low cholesterol, but mental health keeps going up.
Yeah,
we need cholesterol. Your brain needs it. It's actually such a really good, it's also a conditioner for cortisol. So, if we take out cholesterol out of the body, you're going to die pretty quickly.
Yeah.
As long as it's not damaged.
Yeah, well, that's right. And there's a lot of evidence showing the link between depression and low cholesterol. And, it's out there. And, Dr. Anthony Chafee was so kind in sharing so many resources with me. And they're in all the show notes of the chats I did with him. I couldn't even put them all on. There was so much. But I think, if you're curious enough to reach out and you need to see the science, and I think people should. I don't think anyone should take anyone's word for it. There is science, there's evidence there. It definitely helps, when we have that understanding and that grounding. And
that's the thing, it's there. But I think it also, it comes back to going, hold on. If you look at all the people that have moved from a high, carb, sugar-based diet that have actually gone into low carb, you don't have to go zero carb. But, for me, that's where I function. That's where my body it's just so heightened and it functions really well, but I'm very grounded and I've never felt better. Whereas people who coming from a really high carb, what's going to happen is now you've eaten your way into that. So you've eaten your way into mental health issues. You're not feeding your body properly, where your gut to start with, that then sends the signals to your brain. You're going to have to undo that. And that's uncomfortable. And that's going to cause cravings. It's going to cause headaches. It's going to cause a lot of things. However, there is a protocol in place for you to actually lessen those. But you get on the other side of that, and this is about people being empowered for themselves and their bodies. And you know what? I've got clients that have, been carnivore now for 6-7 months, and they've gone out and, when we're allowed out, and, they've eaten something and literally rang me within 24 hours and goes, oh my God, I just felt like rubbish. I'm like, great. And they're like, what? Yeah. I'm like, great. Because you're listening. And you know what, Trace, I'm sure you feel this too. When you remove the sugar and you remove all the non-nutrients food that you're putting in your body, your signals and your intuition just go through the roof. You have such a stronger connection with your body, and you are in control of your mental health. I had a 14-year-old girl that just ate pasta most of the time. And, she'd been seeing me for a while. And I just said to her, let's just start adding in some meat. I had a chat with her dad. And within about 5 weeks, just her eyes were different. She said to me, I just feel different. I feel better. I'm like, excellent.
Yeah. Gosh, it's such an important link to understand. I see, even with my own kids, they have an element of not going to listen so much to you, Mom, but, especially my teenagers, but just trying to, get them to see, like my 17-year-old daughter, all her friends, it's like they're all plant-based. They all want to do this vegan thing. And, they've all got these mental health issues. They're all suffering with anxiety and depression. And it just breaks my heart, because I keep saying, we have to look at what they're eating, and it's all connected. But when the world they're growing up in is sending a completely different message, and their parents probably don't even understand either, it's very difficult.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's one of the things that, we get so disconnected from. So when we talk about, I had vegans friends for a while, and then they got quite sick and, slowly started implementing back meat, which most vegans do at some point. There's a pretty high percentage of people. But going back to the ethical side of veganism, and, we've got to kind of look at, well, where did that start? What did you watch? A lot of people will be watching videos from Peter that show some horrendous things that happen to, animals around the world. But, I think once you start to demystify that and go, hold on, that's actually not how most farmers actually deal with their cattle. They literally love their cattle. But going back to the ethics, so that's a psychological programming. Going, well, if I'm not going to eat meat, then I'm going to save the world. Well, we already know that methane and cows have got nothing to do with it. It's not about the cow, it's about the how. And I think Sacred Cow is the Sacred Cow is such an amazing book to read for anybody. But again, your body functions and your gut, I'm sorry, I'm going to be direct here, does not give one iota about your ethics. It needs the chemicals for it to function. Now, there is every single thing that you need in a meat-based fat diet. And you can Google it. You can Google the amount of nutrients in meat versus plants. Guess what? They're not there. But plants have anti-nutrients. They do stop absorption. Like, for example, with heme iron, with meat, it's the one that your body needs. But if you eat spinach, that can also block calcium. It binds to calcium, and that's why a lot of people end up with kidney stones, and they think that there's something wrong. But it's like, let's look at your oxalates in your diet. But it, again, studies back on the amount of mental health issues when it comes from removing red meat and any plant-based, diet source. They are the most bioavailable nutrient that you need for your body. End of story.
Yeah.
End of story. And if you look at a plant, and obviously, they're sprayed and they're not a natural source. We are marketed to, we are told that that's what we eat in our diet. We need the phytonutrients, rubbish. The only way to get your mental health back into an amazing space is, one, understand how you work your programming from a psychotherapy point, but also to what you're doing with your gut. And I'm telling you right now, if you're having a plant-based diet long-term, you will end up with issues.
So if you have a client that comes to you, say is eating a plant-based or a standard Australian diet, do you recommend they go straight to carnivore, or, obviously it probably depends on the person, you in front of you, but is there, is it small steps? Is it better to go big? Like, what do you sort of see overall?
So most of my clients are on the SAD diet, the standard Australian or American diet, because I obviously have clients overseas as well. So really it just depends on their own personality and, where they're at in their I've had enough factor. So some people, I've got one client here in Australia. He's just gone, I've done keto for 3 years. I've had nothing but kidney pain. He's got one kidney. And he just went full on into carnivore, and literally his kidney pain disappeared in 2 weeks. So it really depends on each individual person. However, it is that uncomfortable reversing of, when you've come from a really high sugar diet, feeling that it's a detox. That's what happens. So again, I work with people in relation to their self-image and their identity, and making little increments. So I also call it what I call the voting system. So it's like, do one thing each day, small little increment that makes you proud of yourself. So long-term change in anything has got to come back to, how did I make myself proud today, which then gets connected to your identity because you feel good. Then that also adds to your self-image from a positive point, because most people that I see operate from a negative self-image and food programming around the way we use food. Historically, most human beings, we use food to lose weight. We use it as a punishment. We use exercise as a punishment. If anyone comes to me and says, I've heard the carnivore makes you lose weight and I just really need to get into a size 8, I'm like, sorry, that's not how I work. If you want to put your body and your health first, that will be a side effect, but you need to educate yourself and you need to be empowered about what's actually happening in your body. Yeah. I've had one vegan client who reached out to me overseas, and I was very clear with her. And I said, look, I need to understand your ethical reasons behind it. But I just said to her, look, long term, you are going to have to look at that from a mental health point. But I left that with her, but most people come to me because they've just had enough, and they've been in a roundabout circle in their lives in mental health and just feeling bloated and just can't even function without having maybe, five Cokes a day.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? But the potential is definitely there when we want to, and we want to, we're not afraid to sit in that discomfort. I think it's so important for people to understand so much, but just that nutrient side of meat, I think, and just how easy it is to absorb. And, you're right. It's just a matter of trying it and feeling it. Like anything, you got to feel it within yourself. Do you find most people, a lot of your clients will have so we take the meat out, our gut, heals, to the extent of which it heals, that's obviously very, very individual. Is it possible then to put stuff back in? Do people want to put stuff back in? Because I know one of the arguments people generally make is that it's so restrictive. And, I very much, think that that's just a personal belief system, that it is restrictive, and we can absolutely see beyond that, because I don't think it is restrictive at all. But yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
So the minute that I hear restrictive, that comes from a pre-programmed diet mentality. So someone that's probably been on diets on and off for most of their life, because most diets literally are about calorie restriction, but whereas in a carnivore way of leading and with the low carb, you don't count calories. I counted calories for like over 10 years of my life, and I literally stopped doing that. It's just such mind freedom around food. So restrictive comes back to, yes, it's a mental thing, because we're so attached to food. So we're using food generally as comfort, more than understanding that we are, as human beings, we need to function, we need to fuel ourselves correctly. Now, if someone wants to basically go back to the foundation and say, look, I can't go zero carb, but I'm happy to reduce my carbs. So what we're going to look at is what plants are actually probably more low oxalate, those kind of things, have that less anti-nutrients in them. So like a cucumber, take out the seeds and take off the skin. Just it really depends on individuality. However, depending on the state of someone's, like, I'm just willing to do whatever I need to do just to start to feel like I'm a human again. So I don't find it restrictive at all. But again, we've got to work through the psychology of what that actually means for someone. I just had a steak before, had some steak and 3 eggs, and I'm just like, whoo, I'm done now. I'm great.
Yeah. And that is interesting. I've forgotten what I was going to say about that, the whole psychology of it. I think it's just knowing that that it's possible, that is there's so much power in that, in that understanding and seeing beyond all of that. Tell me, you've just said that you had a steak and eggs. I just wanted to ask, for you, and bearing in mind this is just for you, for Natalie, and it could look different for everybody, but what would your overall day look like? What would you eat in a day?
Yeah, okay. So normally I'd wake up and I just have a coffee, and either black. Sometimes I may put some, really thickened cream in it. Just depends on how I feel. But I will only eat when I'm hungry. So I can go between OMAD, which is 1 meal a day, to 2. But again, when you are eating this way, you're actually getting the correct hunger signals. So for example, if I just use back when I was, insulin resistant, I was looking for food all the time, even after eating. 45 minutes later, like, I need to eat. And my friends would laugh at me like, you need to eat before you come out, and then you need to eat when you're out. So getting those true signals of when your body needs fuel. So I listen to that so much, and it just becomes a natural part of your body. So today, I had a T-bone and I had 3 eggs with a bit of butter on it. That was it. And you know what? I may eat again. I may not. It just depends on how I feel. Like at the moment, because we can't train, I also weight train. But again, transitioning from no carb into a carnivore lifestyle, it took me about 3 months just for my body to adjust. But again, I want people to really understand, a lot of people say to me, oh, you need carbs for your brain. I'm like, actually, no, you don't, because your liver actually makes glucose for you when you need it. So don't ever, ever, ever underestimate the power of your body, because it will do what it needs to do to thrive when it's given the right environment. Most people are surviving. Their bodies are surviving.
Yeah.
So again, I can go.
Thrive.
We want to thrive. And how we thrive is we feed the gut with an anthropology-based diet. And again, Dr. Pran has got so much information about the history. And, we are carnivores. That's where we come from. And you can add some plants in. Just don't eat kale, because kale's just not going to be good for you. Sorry, it's true. It's crap. But again, Trace, I can go 24 hours without eating, because I'll fast and my body will run on ketones, because also too, when you're fat adapted, your body will use your own fat stores to create energy. Your body's an amazing tool. That's one of the other things when people say to me when they fast and they actually understand what fat adapted feels like, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea I could feel like this and have so much energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And my mind's no longer full of thoughts about food. Like that space that's created when we no longer have to live. Because I was the same. I was exactly the same. As soon as I'd finished one meal, my mind was already thinking about what my next one, or what I was going to eat next.
Do you know how many hours we save in cooking? And no waste, no dead spinach at the back of the fridge that you've never used. But also too, like just going back to the importance of, if we go down to vegetables and even the soil, like the soil now that things are grown in is just so depleted. And then anyone that actually also removes plants, you're also removing all of those pesticides and herbicides from your diet as well, that your gut's also trying to get rid of because it's not natural.
That's right. So do you mostly eat just steak and eggs, or do you eat other like stuff?
I used to eat a lot of chicken, but I find now that chicken just doesn't satiate me. So the other thing with being in this way of eating, and just generally, most people aren't satiated correctly. So, for example, if I have chicken, I don't feel as satiated as what I do with, a ribeye or whatever. But my main go-to is eggs and sour cream, full fat full fat sour cream and full fat normal cream, and just red meat.
Well, that makes sense when you look at the nutrients, again, if we take it back to the nutrient density, I mean, chicken, I heard someone on a podcast say it's just a weak bird. So, it's not good. I thought that was really good. And I'm the same. And I don't eat a lot of chicken because it's also really high in omega-6. And I think, I feel better too when it's red, but I love lamb. I wish it wasn't so expensive.
Lamb is great. Yeah, also too the balance of omega-3 and omega-6. We're so plant-based oil, which is omega-6, and we're so starving for omega-3, and that's the other thing. Sardines and fish and things like that. But even with salmon, like it's great. Don't get me wrong, but for me, I just function so much better on red meat, and I think with most carnivores, you'll probably hear the same thing. But I've added onion in every now and again, but that's about it. And I don't have, and most of your listeners will hear this repeatedly from most carnivores in this way of eating, even with low carb to zero carb, no cravings, don't want anything else. You're not thinking about food. And your brain just goes, okay, I need to eat now. So you eat until you're full and you're done.
And it is important because I think people do bring that diet mentality into, but I even see this as it's possible just with low carb, depending on your version. It's not about a diet. It is a lifestyle. And what we're doing is healing our body so we can tap into those signals. And it is something that I get asked all the time. How much should I eat? Well, how much should I be on the plate? And, it is a lot we have to undo around all of that, but we don't need to count calories. Talk a little bit more about that so people can feel a bit more comfortable not doing that.
Well, that's the diet culture. That's the diet industry that made that up. So, all the apps and, calorie restriction. But again, when you're fat adapted, your body uses fat to fuel, right? So, a lot of carnivores are very lean. And if you look at, Dr. Chaffee and most of the men, they are lean and they train. They don't count calories. Your body, you just eat. And this is the thing, Trace, everyone has lost their ability to listen to their bodies. So, when you're actually on a calorie restriction, not only drives your mind crazy because you're actually not fueling yourself correctly. But again, if you have no fat in there, you're still going to be hungry. You're still going to be, meal prepping 8 meals a day. Like it's just nuts. But that's the culture and that's what people make money on. So again, it is unlearning the fact that you can sit down to, a ribeye and eggs and cheese if you want to and just keep eating until you're full. But that is also a psychological thing that people have to let go of because that actually is really tough for people because they think that they're going to get fat. So, people say, oh, if I eat fat, I'm going to get fat. And it's just I have people say to me all the time, like, oh my gosh, like, what do you eat? And I go, this is what I eat. And they're like, how much fat do you eat? I'm like, I eat a lot of fat. But
and it's clearly making you fat.
That is marketing 101.
But of course it's the fats. There are fats we do want to avoid, which are the the chemical based fat, trans fats and vegetable oils and
trans fats, and the other day it's kind of like your oat milks and your almond milks and all of the milks that are really bad.
Milks. You can't milk an almond.
And there's literally 2% almonds in them. Like, it's crazy.
I know. Yeah.
And they're all got sunflower oil in them. And that's the other thing a lot of people, kind of unwind their brains from around the plant oils. But you know what? Example, like tryptophan is one of the main things that we also need to keep our mood stabilized, right? Now, where do we find high dense amounts of tryptophan? Cow's milk, full cream milk. We also hear the thing of like, but we're not baby cows.
Yeah. So what's your view on that? Do you think milk's okay if you're a carnivore?
If you can tolerate it, obviously it has lactose in it. But again, if I said to someone, I would remove the almond milk. And if you need something, either have cream, like runny cream, or thickened cream, which has got 54% roughly fat. But if you need something, have some milk like that. Overall, obviously there's natural sugars in that. But if you're looking at an almond milk or oat milk, versus what your body will recognize as fuel, it'll use the milk first, the cow's milk first.
That's interesting and makes a lot of sense. And I think too, that's an individual looking at where you're at too, with your level of insulin and and also, making sure that it's full cream and possibly looking at like Jersey cows, that kind of that are naturally higher in the A2 protein. And
yes, correct. So it is literally such an individual thing, because the thing is, it is about keeping that insulin. And, I love anyone that kind of wants to invest in a glucose monitor, because that really empowers you to understand when you eat what's actually happening. And you can feel it. Like it's like I said, I've had clients that have gone out and had a treat, and not because they actually wanted it. This is actually the funny thing. I've said, did you actually want it? And they're like, no, not really. I didn't crave it, but I was just like, oh, I'm there, I'll eat it. And then like, right. And then what happens? And then it takes them 3 hours to feel balanced again. But again, that's the empowering message. It's like we work together to empower you, because as I said earlier, we've got one body to live in, and hopefully we've got that to live in functionally for the rest of our lives. So metabolically being healthy is one of the best things that you can do for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it couldn't be more important now, given the climate that we're all in. And, it's a lot of choices people are having to make, with what they do, with the discomfort that they're sitting in. And, we can certainly learn to see that it's not food that's going to make ourselves feel better. Well, we can if we eat the food that our body, functions.
Correct. If we're using food as source of comfort or pleasure, that's a bit of a different way to go. But, again, your immune system is controlled where? Your gut. So, that's one thing that will make you metabolically healthy. And it's literally reversing. Anyone that's listening that has type 2 diabetes, that is something that you can reverse. And there's enough information now. And a lot of people that we work with, Trace, that also know that. But again, it's the uncomfortability of going through the aches and pains and attachment to food.
That's it. That's it. Oh, it's been a beautiful discussion. I'm going to have to let you go soon. I want to ask you one last question, though. I'd love to know who you're learning from. Who are the people that you really admire and respect and are learning a great deal from at the moment?
Oh, well, Rob Wolf. He's a go-to now, and Diana, who actually co-authored Sacred Cow. Belinda Fetke, everyone within our community. There's also, oh my God, I just lost his name.
Aussie?
Oh, well, Dr. Pran, he's phenomenal.
Yeah.
No, he's American. Sean Baker. Oh my God.
That's funny.
Maybe I need some more of this. That's electrolytes, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's not cordial.
No, not cordial. And it's fluoride free. Just add that in. Look, anytime I hear something new, especially on Instagram when it comes to people who are supporting the agriculture, Peter Ballestead, of course, just people that are just really supporting the message and getting the truth out around, the ethical side of meat. That's where we've come from. So, I think we've just got to stop vilifying meat. It's disgraceful. And we need to heal people, and that's the only way we can do it.
That's right. Heal ourselves and heal the planet. I love that Peter's message is that, we have to look at healing ourselves if we want to heal the world. So,
and most of us are in fear, and fear doesn't heal anything.
No.
So a lot of the time our bodies are so, like I said earlier, they're trying to survive. And when we're in a fearful environment and we've got cortisol and stress responses going off left, right, and center, and I'm telling you right now, if you don't have the right gut health, that's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And one thing I just want to say, Trace, too, before I go, in relation to mental health, when it comes to antidepressants and things like that, obviously they're all made differently, but, the mainstay of an antidepressant is to have a serotonin uptake, right? Yeah. Working, again, on the synopsis of the brain. Just think about it for a sec. If we had serotonin functioning correctly in our gut because of fueling it properly, what do you think would happen?
And like everything, if you think about it logically and don't layer all this other stuff on it, it's common sense, really.
Yeah. Another person I love too, I want to share is Judy Cho, the Carnivore Cure.
Oh, yes.
It's amazing. Yeah.
There's some amazing females in the space too. I know the males are quite dominant, the male carnivores, but there's people promoting a carnivore, but there's some incredible females and like yourself, but others as well, just out there promoting how really, it's been so sad that women mostly think that steak and meat is for men and have left their men to eat it. And we are the ones that have been mostly plant-based and mostly trying to do the right thing. Yet our health is actually more likely to suffer when we don't eat meat and get all those nutrients in. So, I think you'll see across the week, everybody, that I have so many incredibly smart, talented, and beautiful women sharing the benefits of meat. So if you're on the fence, hopefully after this week you won't be. You'll be taking those steps into including more. Even if all you do is include more of that and just gradually take out the other stuff, you don't have to do it all at once. No. But really, there's no reason that you should be avoiding it and not fueling it to yourself and your family. So,
well, two things I'll let people just think about. When they go to eat, this is what I teach my clients. You can either select calm or chaos. So when you move through removing carbohydrates and sugar, you are choosing calm. And I'm telling you right now, meat is the most vibrational calming thing that you can do for your body. The other side is chaos, and that's what we live in when we fuel with everything else that we believe is a standard Australian diet.
Yeah. Well, let's hope more of us choose calm. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us. If you've got questions for Natalie, put them in the comments, and when she can, I'll tag her so that you know how to find her, and you can reach out to her if you'd like to do some work with Natalie. Amazing. I love you so much. Thank you for all that you do. And we'll see you again really soon. Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks everybody.